Hello. A small disclaimer before we begin. When deciding that I wanted to paint Kain and Raziel, I had very kind of grand ideas in terms of how I wanted to do it. I wanted to kind of try and film it in a way that reflected sort of the 90s and the noughties when those games were sort of prevalent, sort of like mainly mid-90s. And so I was filming it in a little bit of a different way. I was trying to find different ways of overlaying the footage to kind of encapsulate that sort of retro thing, whilst also making it feel like Legacy of Kain at the same time. However, as I was doing it, none of it really came together in a way I wanted it to. It wasn't looking good, it wasn't feeling good, and ultimately the whole reason I'm doing this is so that I can make stuff that makes me feel good. So I've kind of decided to scrap all of those little ideas about that kind of retro vibed thing, and instead just going to do what I know, which is make the model, talk about it as I go, and just try and be honest about the process. The main reason I bring this up, though, is because the model is sort of very, very slightly started already, or there is at least a couple of steps that will be missed out of this. Basically, I have already sanded back the models and sort of like done my TLC, making sure all the pieces fit together and all that kind of thing. All of that is already done. And I've also sprayed them with a black primer just to kind of give them a sturdy base to kind of work from. Aside from that, I have done nothing else, so you will still see the majority of the painting for this model. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that it wasn't going to be quite as clean a start as I had hoped. But I'm just going to make this video in the way that I like to make them and just sort of leave it at that. Like I say, I would have loved to have done that kind of retro thing where it felt unique, but I couldn't get it to work. None of it was feeling right. None of it was feeling genuine. So instead, we're just going to go with what we know and, yeah, hopefully make a good model at the end. So I hope you enjoy and, we can fantasize about what could have been. Sorry, a bit anticlimactic, I know. So in today's video, I'm going to be painting a model of Kain. Now obviously Kain is a very popular character within video games and has a very striking appearance. So there are a couple of things that I really want to get right when I'm making this model. But sort of as a personal challenge to myself, this figure stands a lot taller than any of the things that I have painted before. This is going to be a significantly more involved job than I have done before, as I've previously painted miniatures mostly. I've done a couple of larger pieces. I've painted a wolfman sort of about yay high. I've painted a black dragon, which is a much larger piece. But Kain is significantly larger than both of those two put together. So this is going to be a really interesting job. Obviously, with it being a little bit larger, I am going to try and go even further into detail with sort of how I do the paint job. I've never used what do they call it, an airbrush. I've never used anything like that, so I'm not going to be using it in this because I don't have one. So I am going to be painting it by hand, which obviously comes with its own set of challenges in terms of, leaving brush strokes and stuff like that on the actual model itself. But I am keen to give it a go. I've already roughly picked out sort of the colour palette that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to start by applying base colours to the majority of the pieces first, and then begin to build the detail on individual pieces as we go. But like I say, Kain has a very striking appearance, and there's a couple of bits that I need to get right in order for this to kind of sell as Kain. So it's going to be interesting, but like I say, base coats first, and then we'll see what happens after that. Just a few thoughts as I've been going on. So I've done predominantly the base coats for the tops, so the torso section. So, these three pieces here. I've noticed a couple of issues as I've been going, obviously some of which I'm going to have to tackle sooner rather than later. The major one for this piece is the head, sort of like the neck connection. I'll do some close-ups so you can see properly. But the neck piece, basically the neck attached to the torso is a flat cut. The neck attached to the head has a slight sweeping curve to it, so it creates a little bit of a gap between the two pieces, which obviously isn't great. I'm going to have to fix that in some way, shape or form. I'm going to have a second attempt at filing back this sort of like thumb joint here. Thumb joint? I don't know why I called it a thumb joint, but it's a dowel, I suppose, technically. But I'm going to have a second go at sort of filing this back and see if I can get the neck to sit a little bit more flush. But I think at this point I'm potentially going to have to either add some clay, sort of like some air drying clay or something, just to sort of like seal that neck and kind of have it be, a flush finish, if you like. It's probably going to mean that I'm going to have to assemble some pieces slightly earlier because I don't want the base colours or the greens to be misaligned. So obviously at this point the green paint has gone on over the top of the black primer, which I think has been looking good so far. I think it does look nice. Obviously I'm only one coat in really, so it still looks a bit chalky in places. But obviously if I add in sort of like this peachy coloured air drying clay around the neck joint, if I add green straight to that, it's going to look like a totally different green. So I think I'm going to have to potentially fix this gap, apply the clay, sculpt it so that it looks nice, paint it black, wait for that to dry, then paint it green. Just hopefully that'll be enough to get the greens to match up. Additionally, the cape, whilst I'm really pleased with how the red has gone on, I was going to say the green, whilst I'm really pleased with how the red's gone on, obviously for those who know the model and for those who know sort of like Kain's visage, there is a sort of like a house crest that goes on the back of his cape, and I'm going to have to paint that in by hand. So I am beginning the process of trying to figure out how I'm going to do that to make it look nice. But yes, that is definitely an obstacle that I am aware of, and I need to plan more. So next step I think is to see if I can sort out this head joint thing and then go from there, potentially doing some more base colours and stuff afterwards. Just so as I can paint you an accurate picture of this process, what I have just done with the neck took me 2 weeks to build up to doing. I, for some reason, decided that I didn't have the skill or the ability to make it look good and finish it nicely, and so just decided to stop doing anything for 2 weeks. But it turned out fine, so I'm just going to do the rest of the base coats now. So finally, I am done with the base coats for Kain. Obviously excluding the base at this point, but this is kind of the full height and the full stature of the model. It's looking cool. I am really enjoying it, but it feels like it took forever to get to the point where the base coats were actually done. At the end of the process, I am intending to do sort of a full review of both my work on the model and the process itself. But yeah, there's definitely been some mental obstacles in the way of my progress during this build. Basically because the model itself is so good, it's so, I do have certain issues with it, that should be stated, but, the actual model itself looks so cool, and I have had a lot of concern about whether or not I'm actually up to the task. And so, but that, like I say, I'm going to talk about that more at the end. However, at this point, I'm really pleased with how Kain is sort of beginning to come together. There are certain colours that at the moment look a little bit too kind of clean, which obviously is kind of part of the next phase. Particularly the Reaver looks quite sort of off, I suppose, for want of a better word. But obviously now we're going into the detailing stage. Once this sort of base coating is out of the way, I'm going to be going into the detailing stage. So I'm going to be applying washes to basically everything, to kind of add a little bit of shading, a bit of depth, a bit more form to the whole thing. And then I'm going to be going into detailing and ultimately weathering next. So again, this is going to be a piece by piece kind of project. And yeah, I'm still leaving the cape because it scares me. But, next step, detailing and weathering. I am so happy with how this is beginning to come together. I think now that I've actually been able to add some detail into basically the whole physical body of Kain, it's just brought it to life in a way that it wasn't before. I think initially when I'd done the base coats, I was a bit put off by the colours in some respects. Like the green was too green, the red was a bit too red, sort of the vibrance of the colours. It's just not generally how I like to paint a model. I like to have that kind of more slightly desaturated, sort of gritty, grimy, realistic look. I like to have that in my models, and so dry brushing in the sort of camel colour that I used, this one, dry brushing in this colour, it's helped wash out some of the intensity in some of the colours while still picking up on the texture of the actual model. I suppose a kind of gripe, a complaint that I have about the model in general is that there are some pieces that when whoever printed this was making it, there's obviously the support pins. When you're doing a 3D print, you get the support pegs of sort of like how it actually kind of gets printed. And before they get sent to you, generally speaking, somebody will take the time to sort of like pull those pins away and kind of file it back so that it sort of looks good. It feels like in some places, particularly the backs of the arms and sort of the bracers, it feels like some of the textures have actually been kind of like filed away, so certain pieces of it don't look super good having dry brushed it. However, it's elevated the model as a whole. I really love how the Reaver came together, considering that was one of my biggest concerns before I started this phase. I'm so thrilled with how it looks. I think, again, I've managed to, with using a silvery kind of paint, I've dry brushed with the silver to kind of give the impression of metal, and then I've dry brushed with the camel over the top, and that has just sort of brought it down to a beautiful muted metal, which I think it looks so good. I hope it comes across well on camera, but I'm so thrilled that it kind of all came together in the last moment. So going forward, I only really have 2 bits left. I have the base, which obviously Kain is not currently fixed to, he's just sort of like propped up on it, and the cape. In terms of which one I'm going to do first, I think we all know it's probably going to be the base, because I'm putting the cape off. But the cape, I think I've come up with a plan for that. I think I'm going to use a white pencil and sort of draw the design onto the back of the cape and then paint it over the top. Simply because with a pencil I've got more control over the lines and sort of where they sit, and rather than committing to it and just painting it straight away, I think drawing the outline with pencil on the back of the cape is going to work, and then it's probably just going to be numerous coats of white so that I get that beautiful finish where it doesn't look streaky, because sometimes the white paint that I have, it can come out a bit streaky. So yeah, whether it's cape first or base first, I don't know, but we are very near the end and I cannot wait to see him finished. I have slightly mixed thoughts on how the base turned out. I think out of everything, every component of the model, the base has got the most rough quality in terms of print. There's a lot, or has been a lot, of sort of like pieces of it to kind of like try and pull off. So sort of, it's clearly like remnants of when it was printed. It's taken quite a bit of work to sort of like try and pick away at the bits that were left, and then ultimately try and file it back so I don't end up with random bits that look textured and then random bits that don't because of my filing. It kind of gave me a new appreciation for sort of how difficult it must be to kind of file away some of the bits on the back of the arm, which obviously I was kind of whinging about the textures a little bit there. But it wasn't a perfect start. I got quite downhearted about the fact that I thought the model was going to be ruined because I couldn't get the base to look good. However, I am very pleased with the final result. I think the thing that I like about when I make these kinds of models is I like the story of like what's going on with the actual sculpture itself. So obviously having designed the Reaver with the blood splatter on the end, I kind of figured like, well, clearly a fight's taken place, there's going to be blood on the ground, and I think adding that kind of like dynamic kind of blood spatter on the floor has kind of helped elevate the standard of the base overall. These sort of like metal prongs that I've had sticking out of the ground, I tip between liking them and hating them. I'm really not quite sure where I kind of sit at any one time with it, if I'm honest with you. Sometimes I think that I've made them look quite good. Other times I'm looking more at kind of like scabby textures and stuff like that I haven't quite managed to polish well. So it's a mixed bag for the base, if I'm completely honest. I think overall it helps elevate the model. And I certainly don't think that my worries about having ruined it based on the base are valid. I do think that it still looks like a quality paint job. But yeah, it was a roller coaster, that one. As brief a sort of interaction as I had with it, it was a roller coaster. So, all of this that you can see in front of you now, it's all assembled, it's all fixed together and everything like that. I'm going to kind of go into it at the end and kind of add some blood spatter in various pieces, like probably on his feet, maybe up his legs, across his arms. I'm toying with the idea of doing like a bit of a blood dribble from his mouth, because obviously anybody who's played the game, Kain like sucks fountains of blood across the battlefield into his mouth. So, it's one of those where I'm thinking about adding that little bit more. But that's going to be sort of at my own discrepancy afterwards. However, the last piece remains. I am going to be drawing on the sort of crest today, and hopefully I can do it in a way that makes it look good. But we are very close to the reveal of this, like the final reveal of a completed model, and I cannot wait to have it done. And with that, the cape, and thus the model, are complete. Honestly, super pleased with it overall. I think my concerns with the cape were valid. I had to hand paint something into a very awkward shape, and it was difficult. It was challenging, and it still doesn't look entirely like I would like it to. I think just a couple of lines are a touch too thick. However, I think overall it is very clearly Kain, which was one of the things that I was worried about at the beginning. I wanted it to sell as Kain and sort of be quite obviously a model of him. And I think I have achieved that. The crest, it completes the colour palette for his character. And, it does look right. It's just not entirely accurate. But, that's one of those things. It's kind of a part of the model. It's a part of the process. And, maybe in the future, who knows? Maybe I'll do it again and do it a bit differently. But overall, I have really thoroughly enjoyed painting this model. It's been a roller coaster from start to finish. I think this is sort of it's a thing that I think I need to get used to over the course of the inevitable future of the channel, and sort of like the more things that I make. My ability to hold myself back because of the assumption that I'm no good it's a force to be reckoned with, to be honest with you. I can incapacitate myself so fast when it comes to my creative process and sort of like working on these things. Every single time I come to an obstacle, the neck, having to apply the clay, sculpt it, paint it, yada yada yada, having to do all of that, I literally held myself back for like 2 weeks. The cape, every single time I have come to paint and work on this model, I have picked up the cape thinking today's going to be the day, and then I put it back down and I'm like, nope, I'm scared, I'm going to do something else. And I think overall this process took far longer than it needed to. I could have probably had the model done in half the time, but I think the kind of mental wrestling that was being performed during the process was quite intense. But it's rewarding on the other side of it to sort of see the model and be quite impressed and proud with it. I really do think that I've managed to do something special with it, and I'm going to be quite proud to display it as a piece of my collection now. It's
it's really come together and looks very alive in a way that I honestly didn't expect I'd be able to. You know, for some reason I had the assumption that miniatures, you can kind of get away with things with miniatures because the details are small, and if you can kind of paint a delicate line across a miniature, or sort of like, you know, trim the edge of leather armor or whatever to make it look really intricate, people will just be impressed by it because it's like, oh my god, that's so small. But this presented an entirely different challenge, and I assumed that because I can do it on a small scale, I wouldn't be able to do it on a larger scale for some reason. I am pleased at this point to say that I don't believe that is true at all. I think I've actually managed to achieve something quite a high quality. But yeah, that doesn't mean that the struggle wasn't there during the process, and I would bet good money that it'll be there again in the future. But hey, who knows? Maybe that's the thing that keeps me getting better and keeps me good. But overall, like I say, super pleased with the model. The process was long and drawn out, but that's partly my own fault in a lot of ways. But just before we do the showcase for Kain and sort of, you know, put a little thing together for him, stay tuned to the end for a hint of what I'll be working on next time. So thank you very much if you've watched all the way through. It means a great deal to me. And yeah, I'll see you in a couple of months when the next one's ready.